The phone buzzed insistently in my pocket, jolting me out of my focus. I wiped the sweat off my brow and stepped outside the makeshift clinic where the midday sun cast long shadows over the rural village. The name on the screen made my stomach sink. Richard. I almost didn't answer. After years of dealing with my stepfather's antics, I knew calls from him rarely brought good news. But curiosity and maybe a faint hope got the better of me. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Catherine." His tone was cheerful, far too cheerful. "Just thought you'd want to know I've sold the mountain cabin." I froze, gripping the phone tighter. "You did what?" "Sold it," he repeated, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Don't look so shocked. It's for the greater good. Mine, obviously," he added with a smug laugh that made my blood boil. "My name is Catherine, and for as long as I can remember, Richard has been the thorn in my side. My mom married him when I was 15, and he quickly wormed his way into the family with charm and good humor. But beneath that exterior was a man who never hesitated to put his needs first. The cabin wasn't just a vacation home, it was my sanctuary. A place I'd poured years of love and care into, nestled in the mountains. It was where I went to recharge after grueling work trips, where I hosted friends for long weekends, and where I felt most at peace. Hearing Richard talk about it like it was a pawn in his endless schemes was infuriating. "You had no right," I said, my voice shaking. "That cabin wasn't yours to sell." "Relax," he drawled. "I've been managing things around here while you're off saving the world. And besides, what's the point of holding on to something? You're never around to enjoy? It was an easy way to clear my debts. You'll thank me later." "I'll thank you when hell freezes over," I snapped, hanging up before he could say another word. I paced back and forth, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Richard's audacity knew no bounds, but this time he'd crossed a line. What he didn't know, and what I intended to keep to myself for now, was that the cabin wasn't entirely mine to sell. My best friend Laura was co-owner, and the legal agreement we'd set up years ago explicitly required both of our signatures for any sale to go through. This wasn't over. I sat down on the edge of my cot, staring at the phone in my hand like it might burst into flames. My mind raced, replaying Richard's smug tone over and over. How could he think this was okay? Selling something so deeply personal to me as if it were a trinket he could trade for his own benefit. The cabin wasn't just mine. It was a lifeline. It was where I spent summers as a kid chasing fireflies and hiking with my mom before she remarried. After she passed, it became my anchor, the one thing that felt steady when everything else seemed to fall apart. Richard, of course, had no such attachment to it. To him, it was just another resource to exploit like so many things he'd meddled with before. But this wasn't some small favor or inconvenience. This was my home. I tapped on Laura's name in my contacts and waited for her to pick up. "Hey, Kathy, what's up?" she said cheerfully when she answered. "Richard sold the cabin," I blurted out, unable to keep the anger from my voice. There was a long pause on her end. "He what?" "Apparently he needed the money to pay off some gambling debts," I said bitterly. "He thinks he can do whatever he wants, but I know our co-ownership agreement makes that impossible. He doesn't have the authority to sell it without your consent." Laura let out a low whistle. "He really thought he could get away with this?" "None," I agreed. "I'm going to need your help sorting this out. I'll finish my volunteer assignment and head back home as soon as I can. Can you pull up the legal documents in the meantime? I want to be ready to counter this when I get back." "You got it," Laura said, her voice firm. "We'll take care of this together." As I hung up, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Richard thought he'd outsmarted me, that I was too far away to do anything about his betrayal, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. I wasn't the scared teenager who used to let him steamroll me. I was an adult now, with resources, allies, and a firm grip on the law. If he thought this was over, he was about to get a rude awakening. The next few days passed in a blur as I finished up my volunteer assignment trying to keep my emotions in check. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the thought of Richard's betrayal lingered like an unwelcome shadow. I couldn't shake the image of him gloating about settling his debts at my expense. Late one evening, I sat down with my journal. Something I always brought with me on trips. Writing helped me sort through my feelings, and I needed clarity now more than ever. As I scribbled furiously, the memory started flooding back. The first time I visited the cabin with my mom, the hours I had spent restoring it with Laura, the quiet nights by the fireplace when the world seemed to stand still. This wasn't just a building. It was a piece of me. And Richard thought he could just sell it off like a poker chip? No, not this time. Laura called again the next day, her tone brisk and businesslike. "I went through the co-ownership agreement," she said. "You were right. He didn't have the authority to sell without my consent. The sale is invalid." Relief coursed through me, but it was quickly replaced by anger. "Do we know who he sold it to?" "Not yet," Laura replied. "But I pulled the county records and there's no official transfer of ownership. Sounds like he might have tried to do this under the table." That sounded exactly like Richard, always looking for shortcuts, always trying to outsmart the system. "What's our next step?" I asked. "Well, we can either confront him directly," Laura said, "or we can let the legal process handle it. Either way, we're in the clear. He doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thanks, Laura." "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd figure it out," she said warmly, "but I'll always have your back." As I hung up, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I'd finish my work here, return home, and face Richard head-on. I wasn't going to scream or yell, that's what he expected. No, I'd take a different approach. I'd use the one thing Richard always underestimated, my ability to think ahead. He thought he'd won, but by the time I was done, he'd realize he'd underestimated me for the last time. When I finally arrived home, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The cabin always welcomed me with a sense of peace, but now that silence felt ominous. My houseplants were slightly wilted, the mail had piled up by the door, and the fridge was practically empty. I set my bags down and exhaled, the weight of what I needed to do settling on my shoulders. Before I could even unpack, my phone buzzed. It was Richard. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but then I thought better of it. Time to face him. Well, if it isn't my globe-trotting stepdaughter," he said, his voice dripping with fake cheer. "Finally back to reality, huh?" "What do you want, Richard?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "I just wanted to check in," he said, his tone smug. "Make sure you're not too upset about the whole cabin situation. I mean, it's gone now, so there's no use crying over spilled milk." My jaw clenched. "Funny you should say that," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "Because as far as I can tell, it's not gone. Laura and I checked the ownership records. The sale didn't go through. You can't sell what doesn't belong to you." There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to let me know I'd struck a nerve. "That's ridiculous," Richard said, his voice tightening. "The buyer paid in cash, and the paperwork is handled. It's a done deal." "No, it's not," I said. "Laura and I co-own the cabin, remember? Without her consent, the sale is invalid. Legally, it's still ours." His laugh was brittle. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Always playing the perfect daughter, always trying to control everything. You don't know how hard I've had it. Catherine, I did what I had to do. You stole from me," I shot back. "And you think I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? You've made your choices, Richard. Now you'll have to live with them." The conversation ended with him hanging up on me, and I was left standing there, phone in hand, shaking with a mix of anger and triumph. For years, I'd let Richard manipulate situations, guilt-trip me, and take advantage of my patience. But not anymore. I wasn't just defending the cabin, I was reclaiming my boundaries, my voice, and my peace of mind. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open, reviewing the documents Laura had sent me. The co-ownership agreement was crystal clear. Neither of us could sell the cabin without the other's written consent. Richard's actions weren't just unethical, they were blatantly illegal. My thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was, Richard, wearing his usual smug expression. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, though he didn't wait for an answer before stepping inside. I folded my arms, watching as he made himself comfortable in one of my chairs. "What do you want, Richard?" "Look, Catherine," he started, his tone dripping with condescension. "I know you're upset, but you have to understand my position." I was desperate. The people I owed money to weren't exactly patient. I raised an eyebrow. "And you thought stealing my property was the solution?" "Borrowing," he corrected, as though that made it better. "I was going to make it back once my luck turned around. I would have paid you back every penny." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Your luck? That's what you're betting on, Richard? You've been gambling away money for as long as I've known you, and it's never worked out. Why would this time be any different?" He shifted uncomfortably, but his bravado quickly returned. "You're overreacting. It's just a cabin. You're not even here most of the time. Why not let someone else make use of it?" "Because it's mine," I snapped. "Because it's my home. You don't get to decide what I value or what I do with my property. And for the record, Laura values it just as much as I do. Your little sale is invalid and you know it." His face darkened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something like fear. "You wouldn't really go to the authorities, would you? You wouldn't ruin your own stepfather like that." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "Try me." For the first time, Richard didn't have a snappy retort. He stood up, muttering something under his breath, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank back into my chair, my heart pounding. The confrontation had left me shaken, but I also felt a spark of satisfaction. Richard was starting to realize that his usual tactics wouldn't work on me anymore. This wasn't just about the cabin. It was about standing up to someone who had taken advantage of me for far too long.